Good evening, everyone. With a heart filled with praise and thanksgiving to Almighty God, we welcome you to this webinar organized by Pilgrim Stays. Pilgrim Stays is an initiative by Trip Villas and ATC Publishers. We will be soon launching our pilgrimages to the Holy Land, the Vatican, destinations in Europe, and in India. This is our fourth webinar. The first on the Vatican was by Ashley and John Noronha. The second on the Holy Land by Father Praveen D'Souza and Father Francis Xavier. The third on Goa by Alan Machado and Frederick Noronha. And today we have the fourth webinar by Reverend Dr. Francis Thonipara, CMI, one of the foremost authorities on church history, and this program is moderated by Suresh John. On behalf of the partners at Pilgrim Stays, Roshan De Silva, Ivan Fernandez, Peter Anil Rego, and our team at Pilgrim Stays, I extend a very warm welcome to each one of you. A very special welcome to Father Francis Thonipara and Suresh John. Before I hand over the proceedings to Suresh, a word about Suresh John. Suresh John is a serial entrepreneur and the founder and chairman of IDS, one of the world's leading software for hotels. He is married to Tanya and they have a son, Nile. Over to you, Suresh.
Thank you, Nigel. It's a pleasure to be here and to welcome all our viewers for this evening's event. As Nigel mentioned, my name is Suresh John and I'm the moderator for this evening. Our esteemed guest speaker to take us through today's program is Father Francis Thonipara. Father Thonipara belongs to the CMI order, Carmelites of Mary Immaculate, the largest religious order of the Syro-Malabar Catholic Church. He is based out of Bangalore and Dharmaram College and is a leading theologian and an expert on the history of the Catholic Church in India. I'm delighted to welcome you, Father Francis, for this evening's interaction. To open this webinar, I would like to ask Father Francis his views. The first question to kick it off. Father, what, in your opinion, what made St. Thomas choose India for his missionary work? While the other apostles were going towards Persia, Central Asia, and Egypt, how did he come or decide to come to India? Was it because of the history of Kerala welcoming traders or people from outside? What are your thoughts?
So, good evening to one and all. I should say that Apostle Thomas was a very courageous man, as we read in the Gospel, St. John's Gospel. He even said that, let us go and die with him. So this enterprising nature might have prompted Thomas to take up the most adventurous journey in spreading the gospel, a land where we know the religions are there. So India, he might have taken, then he might have made use of the trade routes. He might have made use of the trade routes to come to India. So every possibility is there for the Apostle Thomas to come to India. And also he might have, during the Old Testament times, we have references to Malabar Coast in Solomon's references there. So that also might have prompted him to come to India, a fascinating place.
Interesting. So the Malabar Coast has been kind of a popular or famous place even before St. Thomas came.
So there was trade route. There was a trade route between Malabar Coast, Muziris it was called, Muchiris or
Osiris,
Muziris,
yeah.
or now it is called Krankanur or Kodungalur. So
Yeah.
that trade route was there, and we had pepper from here to take to Rome, Roman Empire, and many other places. And also teakwood and peacock. All these things were taken from here to different parts of the world. So it was a well-defined trade route, we should say.
Oh, excellent. That's great. Father, I think you have made some presentations. Perhaps you can take us through that presentation for the benefit of all our viewers.
Thank you. Let me have my presentation. At the outset, let me thank Mr. Nigel Fernandez and Mr. Roshan for having given me this chance to speak on the origin of Christianity in India. And this presentation is moderated by Mr. Suresh John. I also thank him for having accepted this invitation of moderating the session. And also I should thank Mr. Herman Voss for making this presentation more attractive. So coming to the history or the origin of Christianity in India, there is no unanimity among the historians on the question of the origin of Christianity in India. St. Thomas Christians, traditionally known as they trace their origin back to Apostle Thomas. There are historians who claim that Apostle Bartholomew also preached the gospel in India. But there are others who claim that the origin of Christianity in India can be traced back to the Persian migration in 345 AD under the leadership of Thomas of Cana. Those assert the apostolic origin of the Christianity in India do not deny the Persian migration. However, there are scholars, especially the Western scholars, who deny the apostolic origin of St. Thomas Christians, basing on the argument that there are no contemporary documents or monuments, literary sources of the first century to substantiate the argument of the apostolic origin. So as I have mentioned, St. Thomas Christians, they argue strongly on for traditions to substantiate their argument of the apostolic origin. So I may deal with in a very short form, I may deal with the apostolic origin with under the headings the four traditions. First one is the Malabar tradition. Malabar tradition, as you all know, is a tradition associated with the places, families, and celebrations. Suppose you happen to be in Malabar or the so-called present-day Kerala, there are places which are associated with the Apostle Thomas. There are families which are associated with Apostle Thomas. And there are celebrations. Places, for example, tradition says that Apostle Thomas founded 7.5 churches. 7.5 churches he founded. And again they say that, for example, typical example, you can see the Palayur. Even today, the ponds, they say that this is a place where Apostle Thomas baptized the first Christians. This is the place. And nobody can deny this fact because there are circumstantial evidences. For example, we have a water connectivity to this place, Palayur. So Thomas might have reached there, and some local people opposed to this conversion, baptism, etc., etc. They went away from there, and nearby you can see a place called Shavakar, a place of curse. They say that they cursed the place and went away. Palayur is a typical example where even Hindus say that there is an apostolic the apostolic origin can be traced to this place. The same way we have number of places like this. Malayattu, for example. Kodungalur, as I have mentioned, Muziris. One of the trade centers, Muziris. Now we call it Kodungalur or Krankanur for the Portuguese people. And that trade route is there. So a possibility there for the Apostle Thomas to come to India. So, but unfortunately, as our Indian minds say, we never keep any documents. So we have only oral traditions. These oral traditions got written from only in the 16th century with the arrival of the Portuguese. And also we can see that we have number of folk songs and dance forms, etc., etc. For example, Ramban part, Margangali part, Viradian part. All these narrate the arrival of Thomas to India, and this is handed over from generation to generation. So we basically depend on the oral tradition that got a written form in the course of time. Then coming to the families, there are a number of families which claim that their ancestors were baptized by Apostle Thomas. Even today we can see that we have a number of families there, Malikal family, Kalligao families. They claim that Apostle Thomas was the one who baptized their ancestors. So that we cannot deny even today. It is said that we cannot convince a St. Thomas Christian saying that no, Apostle Thomas did not come to India. Even the young generation, we could not convince them. And second one is, again, we can say that we have celebrations. Even when the Latin Church tradition celebrated Feast of the Apostle Thomas on another day, St. Thomas Christians always celebrated it on July 3rd. They call it Dukharana Memorial. So these are the things we can speak about the Malabar tradition. We can have a detailed discussion, but unfortunately, time is very limited. So we have the Malabar tradition. Second one is called the Kaldian tradition. Kaldian tradition is mainly the tradition associated with fathers, testimonies of the fathers of the church. Testimonies of the fathers of the church. So the fathers of the church, we have now number of references, even starting from the 3rd century on, the doctrine of the apostles traces Christian priesthood in India directly to Apostle Thomas. Saint Ephraim the Syrian, he speaks about the relics of Thomas, and he says that blessed art thou, O thrice blessed city that has acquired this pearl, none greater doth India yield. So the tradition is that the relics was taken to Edessa. So it was originally in India, it was later taken to Edessa. Then again Ambrose, so Grigori the Nazianzen, he speaks about were not the apostles aliens among the many nations and countries committed to them? What had Paul in common with the Gentiles? Luke with Achaia, Andrew with Epirus, John with Ephesus, Thomas with India, Mark with Italy. So we can see the reference to India, and St. Jerome, for example, testifies that the Apostle Thomas, as it has been handed down to us by tradition, preached the gospel to the Parthians, the Medes, the Persians, the Bactrians, and the Magians. He slept in the city of Calamina, which is in India. So there are patristic evidence, a number of evidences we can produce from the part of the writings of the fathers of the church. There are also a few Chaldean liturgical books which speak about the apostolic origin of the St. Thomas Christians. As you know that the church in the course of time came in contact with the Persian church. So the Chaldean liturgy refers to the apostolate of St. Thomas in India. Then Jacob of Saruk, for example, another example, a typical Syriac poet and theologian, he says that the Apostle Thomas, on leaving for India and parting from the apostles, wept and moved them to tears. The other apostles moved them to tears. Of course, we should take with a pinch of salt because there may be a little bit of exaggerations here and there, but There are testimonies on the part of the authorities of the church, teachers of the church. So we cannot simply brush aside saying that, no, it is only a myth. No, it is not a myth, it is a tradition. Now we come to the Coromandel Coast, the present-day Madras or the Coromandel Coast. There we can see that there are three places. Little Mount or Chinnamale is one of the three places associated with the Coromandel tradition. This is the place where tradition says that St. Thomas used to spend his time in prayer. Chinnamale, a place to be visited, but unfortunately it is more modernized and we don't see much of antiquity there. But still, the place is associated with St. Thomas. And another place where we can, in Chennai, is that we have the St. Thomas Mount, where tradition says that he had his last breath. He died there. As a martyr, he died there. Then the last place associated with St. Thomas in Madras or Chennai is Samthom or Mylapore. We call it the tomb of the house of the apostle. Is at the St. Thomas Cathedral Basilica at Mylapore. Nowhere in the world we come across an argument saying that this is the place, the tomb of the Apostle Thomas, except Samdom, Mylapore. Why Mylapore? It is called Mylapore. Tradition says that following the Hindu gods and goddesses, Thomas also had a vehicle called a peacock. It is a city of peacock. Even today, the city is known as Samthom or Mylapore. So these are some of the Coromandel, the places associated with the Coromandel tradition. Now we speak about the tomb of the Apostle Thomas. And when the Portuguese came, the first attempt they made was to see the tomb of the Apostle Thomas. They excavated and they testified that this is the tomb of the Apostle Thomas. So, and also it is said that it is known as the house of the Apostle. And some people even say that there is a monastery connected with the house of the apostle. Then the pilgrimage. Even today, St. Thomas Christians from all over the world, they made it a point that they have to visit the tomb of their apostle in faith, the father of faith, Thomas in Mylapore. So we have the regular pilgrimage. That was testified by the Portuguese missionaries in the 16th century. We have a number of testimonies from the part of the Portuguese missionaries. And they say that these people who, when they come to Mylapore, they collect the soil from the tomb and they consider this is having a healing medicinal power because of their belief in the Apostle Thomas. And coming to the relics, we cannot have what we call that, we don't have any concrete or what we call it, there are differences of opinion. But we strongly believe that Apostle Thomas, his tomb is in Mylapore. There are people who say that it was taken to Edessa, then during the Crusades it was taken to Ortona, and from Ortona, Cardinal Eugene Tisserand in 1953 brought something to the Kerala church that is in Areekode. Now we keep it in Areekode. But we do not know, but recently we have a lot of studies on this, and we say that the tomb is in, the mortal remains are in Mylapore, although they might have taken a portion of these things. So there are differences of opinion regarding this. We need further research and study. Then coming to the question, what about the Christians in the Coromandel Coast? And the argument, especially the Portuguese people say that we had a persecution earlier church in the earlier days in Coromandel area. So they moved to their homeland, that is Malabar Coast. The Malabar Coast is traditionally a place that is the present-day Kerala state, except maybe Mangalore and Kanyakumari. Extending from Kanyakumari in the south to the Gokarnam or Elimala in the north, that is called the tradition, that is called the Malabar Coast. So the Malabar Coast was very prominent in the early history. We can look at few maps, we can see that it was very prominent in the early history, even before Christianity. Then coming to the fourth tradition, that is called the Western tradition, that is called the basing on the Acts of Judas Thomas. It is an apocryphal writing, but there is a nucleus of truth that nobody can deny. There is a reference to the King Gondophares, and it is said that Thomas might have had two journeys, one to the north, one to the south. First phase is in the north and second phase is in the south. For example, in Takshila, even today, Takshila and some of the places in Afghanistan, there are references to Christian presence even in the early centuries. Even if you go to North India, some places, Udaipur, we can say that in Madhya Pradesh, we can see that there are references to the early Christian presence. Even recently, we had some excavations in Goa. Some of the people came across one Pallavi cross on the banks of river Mantava. And it is a Pallavi cross, that is a Persian cross, and that is today kept in the Pillar Fathers Museum in Goa. That speaks about the beginning of Christianity in Goa even before the arrival of the Portuguese. So we need a lot of excavations and studies, the particular situation of India today. These things may not be possible. We may reach a place where there may be other centers of worship, etc., that may lead to other problems. So this is with regard to the apostolic tradition. So what we want to say is that we don't have any Acts of the Apostles, or we don't have any catacombs of the first century or second century. So this vacuum is compensated by a living tradition. So we argue for that. The living tradition replaces what we have it in Acts of the Apostles or in the catacombs, the physical, the evidences. And this is supported by the physical possibility. Physical possibility means anybody could come to Malabar Coast in the first century. And Apostle Thomas surely might have taken the sea route to come to India. So physical possibility. And this physical possibility is a historical actuality in our case by arguing that the traditions, which is a living tradition for the last 2,000 years without any break, is compensating that vacuum which is created by the absence of any monuments or any written documents. So we say that this physical possibility, the case of Apostle Thomas and his mission in the Malabar Coast, is a historical actuality, and this is being testified by a living community. We never come across anywhere in the world a community named after Apostle St. Thomas Christians other than the Christians who have their roots in the Malabar Coast. Of course, they are divided into different groups, etc., but at the same time, they all proclaim that Apostle Thomas is their father in faith, their father of faith. So this is very important. A community. And also this community is not a small community, it's a community of a large number of followers. They are following different liturgical traditions now, but at the same time, they all claim that Apostle Thomas is their father in faith. So we say that the physical possibility is a historical actuality basing on the strength of the living tradition, which is a tradition which is associated with the places, families, and celebration, which is there are 4 traditions. So I conclude by saying that there is all possibility for Apostle Thomas to come to India. I may conclude with the words of one of the famous historians of England, and he concludes by saying that some 30 years ago, that he has written some in 1927, some 30 years ago, the balance of the probability stood absolutely against the story of the Apostolate of Thomas in India. We suggest that today the balance of probability is distinctly distinctly on the side of historicity. So, lot of research is being done, researches are being done, and as a result, the authors now convincingly argue that the Apostolate of Thomas in South India is a physical, historical actuality. That doesn't mean that we don't go for further studies. There is a lacuna of the first 4 centuries after till the arrival of Thomas of Cana in 345. We need further archaeological excavations to make sure that it is a historical actuality. So I conclude by saying that my strong conviction I share with you by saying that Apostle Thomas arrived in South India in the Malabar Coast in the 1st century AD 52, and he was martyred. Traditionally, we believe that on 3rd July in 72 AD. Now we may speak about a little bit about, I don't know whether it is interesting for you, and there are people who claim that Bartholomew was in India. Mainly there are 2 authors. One is Dr. George Morris. Second one is A.C. Perumal, a Jesuit. They say that Bartholomew might have evangelized a place called Kaldian, connecting with the visit of Pandenus. You may be knowing that Pandenus was the director of the catechetical school of Alexandria. And it is said that he came after the invitation from the part of the Indians for an intellectual dialogue. Alexandria was the world-famous university those days, learning center those days. The biggest library was in Alexandria. So he might have come to India. And then when he came to India, there are references by saying that he came across the Gospel of St. Matthew in the Hebrew language. Then people said, no, this is a gospel brought to us by St. Bartholomew. So now they want to identify which is this Bartholomew's area of mission. They say that Bartholomew went to India Felix. Then they say that this India Felix is Kalyan. Kalyan, you know that Felix, Latin that is happy. Kalyan means happy. So they say that Bartholomew might have preached in Kalyan. And then we ask the question, where are the followers of Bartholomew? Then those who argue for the apostolate of Bartholomew in India, they say that there was a Christian community in Kalyan, but in the course of time, this community got integrated with the Portuguese Christians, the new converts from the part of the Portuguese people. Other people say that they disappeared in the course of time and they lost their identity, as we have an identity of the St. Thomas Christians and they lost their identity. But there are no many takers for this argument, but still we hold that Bartholomew might have come to India, but we don't have any tradition, living tradition, as in the case of Apostle Thomas. So thank you very much for your patient listening, and thank you. And may I wish you a very, very fruitful discussion. Discussion may bring out more lights on this question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Father Francis, for your wonderful presentation detailing this, the coming of St. Thomas and to Malabar. In fact, it's quite interesting. One of the questions that I had for you was Kerala a tolerant society at that time to accept outsiders like the Christians and the Jews to come in and evangelize or conduct missionary service? Was it coming from the king downwards, or was it the local culture to accept traders and from around the world?
Yeah, trade route, I told you that we had a big business that was going on in the Malabar, on the Musiri port. Musiri port was very strong till 14th century. Then only Kochi became very prominent. Afterwards, only Kochi became very prominent. Coming to the background...
Specifically, I wanted to ask you about whether the society itself was tolerant to new faith and new evangelism about Christianity and Judaism?
So, from the experience, we should say that the society was very tolerant. That is why, after some time, the 4th century, when Thomas of Cana came, the king, local ruler, granted him 72 privileges. Even before that, the society, that they were from the early Christians were from the upper caste. Sorry to say that, use the expression caste, but that happened like that. So they kept their identity, and the Hinduism was not so organized as we have today. Buddhism was very strong, Jainism was very strong in Kerala. So these people might have tolerated, and eventually we can see that some of the rulers even patronized the churches. And the Christians from their side, they borrowed many of the Hindu practices. You may be interested in knowing about that. They were interested in, they adopted many of the Hindu practices. Of course, they kept some of the superstitious practices, which was not very good for the Catholic Church or Christian religion. But for their survival, the famous historian, English historian Brown, used to say that this caste consciousness and the apostolic consciousness made the Christians to survive all through the century. You can take the number of Christians today following the apostolic tradition of Apostle Thomas, mainly because of this caste consciousness. Now we are slowly aware of the difficulties of this caste consciousness, but we don't glorify that caste consciousness anymore. Although we are prejudiced of that, Syrian Christians, when people say they are a people who are always of caste-ridden people. Of course, but now you know that because of the internationality and globalization, we are thinking little more wider, and our people are not confident people. So there was a kind of tolerance that I should accept, and also you can see the practices we are having, the type of practices we are having, very much borrowed from the part of the Hindu or from the existing practices of the Hindus, etc., etc. And
So
even
was it a blend of Christian faith with Hindu culture?
there is no doubt it was a beautiful blending of Hindu culture and Christian religion. Of course, we have few mistakes here and there. There is a famous expression by saying that Christian in religion, Syrian Christians are Christian in religion, Oriental in worship, and Indian in culture. One of our fathers, Father Francis Podivar, coined this expression: Christian in religion, Oriental in worship. That is why we have the Kaldian liturgy or the West Syrian liturgy, Oriental in worship, but Indian in culture. We don't say Hindu, but Indian in culture. We have a lot of things like that. That made the Christians to be almost like, as in the case of the early Christians, sometimes some people say that they were almost like part of the Hindus. That extreme position I cannot take, but at the same time, we had our own limitations. But you please understand that our ancestors were living in a place where Christianity was a minority. They could survive in spite of all those things. They could survive because of their proper healthy adaptation of the local culture and practices. If you want to speak about the adaptation, I can speak a lot, but I think you may be interested in many other topics.
Of course, it's very interesting. As I was preparing for this session, I was doing some research myself. It's quite interesting that many in the Western world are quite amazed that India had Christians in AD 52, where along with Saint Thomas, because most common belief was that many Indians converted to Christianity during the British time, or perhaps during the time when Vasco da Gama came with the Portuguese. But the fact is that St. Thomas Christians were there as soon as Jesus Christ, during that period itself in 52. So that's really an amazing fact that very few people in the Western world did not know. And this is quite testimony to the fact of India's welcoming of Christians and Thomas and his evangelism into India.
Very good, thank you. Then you know that there is even a tradition by saying that there was a Christian kingdom in Kerala, in Malabar.
Yes.
And they handed over the whole power when the Portuguese came. They handed over the whole power to the Portuguese people. And what was the search of the Portuguese people? They were in search of Christians and spices. They heard about the Christians, but now they wanted to meet. And also the whole spice things were controlled, cultivated by the Christians. Christians were very good, enterprising type people. We cannot deny the fact that there may be Jewish presence earlier, but we do not know exactly how far it was influential in making Thomas to have a trip to come to India. That is a dispute point even today. There are others who say that Jews were there, then other others who say that Jews came only after the destruction of the Jerusalem temple to this side. Anyhow, if you analyze critically, we can say that we have a Jewish blood within us, a little bit of blood within us, and there was a movement once upon a time tracing our origin to Jewish religion, Jewish background, etc., etc. The enterprising of the Christians and Thomas Christians, if you look at, we can see that they are very enterprising type. You take the examples of migration to Malabar or to high ranges. They are the people who took leadership in migrating to, and all over the world now, you come across the migrant people. They want to work and they want to do something substantially, and adventurous spirit is much there. So I used to say that we have our father in faith, Apostle Thomas. The same adventure is being followed by his followers.
Interesting that, I thought one of the key factors was that the Christians were not insular. They were kind of blending with the locals in not just their faith, but also in their culture and in their arts. And so, architecture, just take the example of a church. An old Christian church has got a lot of elements that are also part of or borrowed from a Hindu temple, isn't it, Father Francis?
Typically, you are correct, because what you say is absolutely correct. That is there, but once again I say that we don't glorify. There were limitations. We don't glorify our existence, but there are so many positive elements. It is said that Vasco da Gama, when he reached Calicut, arrived at Calicut, he visited one Hindu temple thinking that it would be a church. He visited. And our church and house architectural style was typically of the native style, especially the church. If you go to Chenganur, there is an old church of the pre-Portuguese time. That's still there. Chungapara, there is a church there, typical of the Indian architecture. We borrowed after some time, with the arrival of the Portuguese, there is a mingling of, we started constructing churches in a different way, facade and all those things. We are not blaming the Portuguese people, but the whole thing took another direction, and as a result of it, we don't have many churches, except maybe one church, or maybe the church in Tiruvankor in Tamil Nadu is a so-called half church. We have not many churches. Tracing back to the structure of the, now there are attempts to make sure that we have few churches built according to the Indian genius and Indian architectural ethos, architectural style, etc., etc. One example. Another example, we can see that the flag staff in front of the church. Typical example of adaptation from the Hindu tradition, Hindu temple tradition. Only the difference is the flagstaff in front of the Christian church is having a cross. That is spread. We know that even the Latin tradition is following that flagstaff tradition. The flag is on the top. People say that the church festival is ready. We are festival. And the same way we can procession. First and procession around the churches we had. And the main elephant was one of the essential elements of the church celebrations. That's the reason why we have the main door of the church is called Anavadi. Today we can see that there are few churches maintain that. Anavadi means which is the place where the elephant comes.
Of course.
Before the procession. So even elephant might not have entered the church, but at the same time we can see
symbolism.
And again the granite crosses.
Of course.
Granite crosses, that is unique. Granite crosses. Again we can see that the prasada, after offering the prasada or offering the oil. These are examples.
The ceremonial lamp.
Ceremonial lamp. Another typical example is the use of tali for marriage.
Of course.
Now it is spread to other states. Earlier it was only among the Syrian Christians, even the mantra kodi. Typical of the inculturation, we should say.
Of course.
So these are some of the things. We have many more things we can share if you have interest.
Questions. Of course, there's one question, Father Francis, I got from one of the viewers. Did St. Thomas visit Chennai or Madras at the invitation of the king of that place?
It is said that in the Acts of Judas Thomas, we have two references to two kings. One is Gundaforus, other one is Masdai. So we identify Gundaforus to the northern mission and northern part, and Masdai might be the king in south, in Chennai. We do not have any clear document by saying that he was invited by the local ruler. But there are others, for example, Francis Rosas J. He even claims that Apostle Thomas had his first see in Chennai. Then, because of the persecution, these Christians migrated to Malabar Coast. So we do not have many documents. We are depending mainly on the narratives of the Portuguese people who collected the tradition, which is narrated to them in an oral form by the local people. For example, Amador Correa, one of the authors from one of the missionaries from Portugal, or Amador Francis Rosas J. These are some of the Pareto. These are some of the authors who hand over these traditions in the oral form, in the written form to us. So we have to depend very much on the oral tradition which the missionaries received from the local people.
Okay. So I have one question from one of the viewers. Is it true that the body of St. Thomas was removed and kept in Edessa in Syria and later transferred to Ortano in Italy? I think you touched upon it, but maybe perhaps an explanation on that question.
We should say that it's a riddle, because from the testimony of Ephraim, many people believe that it was taken to Edessa, and during the crusade, it was taken to Ortona in Italy.
Okay.
And it's a traditional belief. But we people say that, the St. Thomas Christians say that, and also depending on the testimony of the Portuguese missionary, they say that when some came from the west, that is from Edessa, in search of the relics of the Apostle Thomas, they have they made some fraud and they have given the relics of somebody else, and they are not convinced of this, and Syrian Christians are not convinced of the arguments that the relics were taken away. But it might have happened that a part of the relics might have been taken to Edessa. From there, it is taken to Ortona during the crusade. But recently, BBC had made a scientific study, and I have a document with me, and they say that 99%, they say that not the whole body, the remains of the Apostle Thomas, maybe part of the hand or some bones like that, relics like that, might be having a tradition of 2,000 years, ancestry of 2,000 years. So that we cannot simply deny that. Our strong argument is the testimony of the Portuguese people. The first thing they have done, they come from Europe and they may be knowing the whole situation of Orthona and other places. But they strongly believe that Orthona may have a portion of the relic. The rest of the things might have been kept in Mylapore itself. So this is the, I told you that it's a bill and nobody could give a proper answer to this. And Father George Nedimat is not very much for saying your Orthona tradition. George, Father one of the famous reporters. He's not for not favoring this Orthona tradition. But still, some St. Thomas Christians, when they go to Italy, one of their first priorities is to visit Orthona.
All right.
And a place to be visited, they say that, where they believe that, traditionally they believe that the relics are kept there. That doesn't mean that we don't have the relics in the tomb of the Apostle Thomas, the so-called Malabar tradition. We strongly believe in that tradition also. That also needs, I told you, that also needs further research and study.
Of course. Thanks, Father. You had also touched upon this, and there's a question related to one of the viewers, related to if there was Apostle Andrew is said to have passed through northern parts of India on his way to Central Asia. Is there any clear view on this?
I am not an authority on speak about St. Andrew because we are juggling with Apostle Thomas and Bartholomew. But Andrew, I don't believe. Andrew is associated with Constantinople, Byzantine Andrew. Even Andrew is having some connection with people say that as a Byzantine tradition, and the Byzantines believe that is Andrew might have preached the gospel there. And we don't have much arguments for St. Andrew. It is good that when we have discussions like this, then new things come out, then we can develop our maybe, things like this. Okay.
So the other question I have is, you touched upon this, but there is a general belief that the Nazranis or the Syrian Christians are quite enterprising people, even today, even those days during the king's time, and perhaps they were the first converts, but even today they are quite enterprising. Is there a history to that, or is there a reason for their enterprising nature, Father?
Their enterprising nature is very clear from their migration character. You know that they are all over the world.
Is there a Jewish blood in that?
What I wanted to say is that they are very enterprising type. Even that was accepted, appreciated by the local rulers. They were given 72 privileges. For what? They were given these privileges so that they keep their own identity and they may do something. They were very good farmers. You see that only till recently we come across the Syrian Christians. Maybe in the 50, 60 years time we come across Syrian Christians in the cities. If you look at the history of the Syrian Christians, they are in the remote villages or the places where they could cultivate the spices. Pepper, for example, ginger, for example, a cardamom, for example. Even today, many of the owners are of this type of estates are Syrian Christians. I don't deny that. People. Another thing is, it is said that in Saktan Tamburan in Trichur invited the Syrian Christians to come to his place to strengthen their agriculture and their business, etc., etc. You know that Trichur people are very enterprising types. The South Indian Bank, for example, or the Kuris they are having. So there are, and also in Kanyu, for example, it is said that the king wanted to make sure that a group of families are near to the so-called king's residence, so that they are very enterprising. They engage in agriculture, farming, etc., etc. So these are some of the evidences we can say, and the typical example, the enterprising nature is our own girls. Maybe the first ones to go abroad as nurses.
Of course.
All over the world they are now. They are doing that doesn't mean that I don't deny that other people are not engaged in, but we were the pioneers in one sense. to take this
course.
type of enterprise and things. And other things are, we have Muthoot, Manorama, Deepika, Federal Bank, South Indian Bank, Cochin Bank, Pala Bank, Pala Central Bank, Catholic Syrian Bank, all had its origin from the Syrian Christians. So these are
Thank
some.
you, Father. I had one other question, which I want to make sure that we are keeping our time. Since Thomas of Cana settled in Kerala, would some of the St. Thomas Christians be of Persian descent?
No, that is why we have to make a clear distinction. St. Thomas Christians, typically speaking, are those who are the followers of Apostle Thomas. And the tradition says that they are settled down in the northern part of Kodungalur. But because of some problem here, or the what we call that ecclesiastical life is not flourishing, then our people invited these people to come to India and to revitalize the Christian community, and they settled down in the southern part of Kodungalur. That is why they are called Thikkum Bhaga in Malayalam, or called the Southeast. But we cannot strictly say that they are St. Thomas Christians. They are an endogamous Christian community under the leadership of Thomas of Cana. We can even say that they are an ethnic community because they don't allow intermarriages. A community, they claim that they are the direct descendants of our Lord and our Lady, etc., etc.
So they're called Canaanites, right?
Canonized. They have a diocese. For the Catholic Church, they have an archdiocese, Kottayam Archdiocese, exclusively for the Syrian canonized. They are called Syrians, but we cannot strictly say that this is St. Thomas. St. Thomas Christians are the Northeast who claim that Apostle Thomas is the father of their faith. That doesn't mean that they don't accept Thomas, or they celebrate the feast of Tukrana, July 3rd. They celebrate together with, and the liturgy, the Catholic tradition is same as that of the Syro Malabar and the Coromandel Diocese. They all follow the same liturgy. That is
since you mentioned that they don't intermarry, so their lineage could be still the Persian lineage, isn't it?
Yeah, sure. They have that Persian connection. They have that Persian connection. They try to, almost like an endogamous community, we should say that. Almost.
Also, the Chaldeans also are like that, isn't it, Father?
No, Chaldeans, we say that Chaldean church is a church. Traditionally, now it is called the Nestorian church, or the Kaldian church is the Catholic church. The Nestorians are the other group of the people, etc., etc. Some people even say that Abdai and Mary, yesterday was the feast of Mary, they were the disciples of Apostle Thomas, and that is the connection of the St. Thomas Christians, or the Syro Malabar Church of St. Thomas Christian, with the Persian church of the Chaldean church. No, that is for ecclesiastical matters. We were having regular bishop from Persia with the arrival of Thomas of Cana. So we cannot say that Chaldean church and the Canaanites are the same. No, Chaldean church is having a tradition of its own, and after this Council of Ephesus in 431, they went away from the Catholic communion, and 498 they started on what we call an patriarchate in Pelusia, Ctesiphon. They had their center, but there was a Catholic section there, and they regularly send bishops to India. We cannot say regularly in the sense that at times we have no bishops in Malabar. And those bishops continued till 1597. And the last bishop was Mar Abraham, was buried in Angamari. And recently some of the excavations made, and it is identified that this is the tomb of the last Persian bishop Mar Abraham. That is in the Hornisdas Church in Ankamali, that is now part of the FCC Sisters. Okay. So we cannot say that the Kaldian Church and the Canaanites are the same. No, that is not correct.
Okay.
We have the Persian influence.
Okay. Father, one question I had, what are some of the pilgrim locations or places in Kerala that so there's a viewer question that you recommend that Christians should most necessarily see to experience Christianity in Kerala?
If I say in Kerala we have a number of saints, We are blessed with, the Catholic Church is blessed with the number of saints. Our own founder is a saint, Saint Kuriakos Elias Chavara. So we start with Mananam. Mananam is called the Monte Cassino of India. The first monastery in India is in Mananam, a pilgrim center. Then I am speaking from the Catholic side. I go to the Jacobites or Orthodox side. Then we can have Barananganam. We can have Vellur, where Euphrasia, Barananganam, we have Alfonso. So we have Maria Theresia in Iringarapura. So we have a number of places like that for the saints. And coming to the ancient churches, we can say that we have, even today, there is a strong tradition in Coromandel. They say that this is a place where Our Lady appeared. Even we have a place in Muttijira, or we can say the Edatua, Ramupuram, or Pala, Pathitu. There are a number of churches, Adirambuda, there are a number of churches like that. Then coming to the Orthodox or the Jacobite churches, we can say the Niranam Church, or what we call the Kadamathittu Church. All these are some of the, and the church in Kottayam. There are two churches in Kottayam where we come across the typical Persian cross, the so-called Persian cross, the church in Kottayam. That's now belongs to, I think, the Jacobites or the Orthodox. So we have the churches, some of the churches. But if you go to Kerala, in Kundangulam, there is a church where even today the ancient tradition is being kept. And of course, we can visit the Chungapara church in Changanur side. That is a typical pre-Portuguese church we are having. So there is no shortage of visiting places. As pilgrims, we have a number of churches. And also, some of the churches are beautifully built and attract the tourists also. Not only pilgrimage, even we can have tourism. We can promote tourism together with the pilgrimage. That is the new culture of the Christians in India, I should say that. As in Europe, we should have tourism together with pilgrimage, so that we have both the mingling of both the secular and the sacred. So there is no separation. So we can try for that. So I wish all the best for their pilgrimage.
I think as we are coming to 8 o'clock, there's one question about food. Some hungry soul is asked this question. What are the particular cuisine that Kerala Christians have popularized? So your thoughts on that, Father, since you're also a Malayali Christian.
I am also enjoying food, and also I can also enjoy. So we have Kodalappam, for example, Cheepappam,
okay,
Cheepappam, Kodalappam, Vattayappam.
Of course.
And these are some of the typical, and there are number of, even preparing the fish or preparing the curry and all. We have a typical style. I think one of our members of the community has written, I forgot her name, she has written the food style of St. Thomas Christian. It's an area that is very, very interesting and that is unique. Even the dress habit, you can see the chatta, munda and all. How modest are living there in those days. They had chatta. But all these things are now disappearing. Maybe for the Margangali we come across this type of chatta munda.
Hopefully we'll have the younger viewers of our webinar want to explore what are these old traditional clothing. I remember the chatta munda kavani of our grandparents.
So these are the things I think through this webinar, we should motivate our youngsters to go back to the antiquity. When we enjoy the fruits, people say that don't forget the roots. So that is my concluding message. So let us try to live the Christian antiquity, and at the same time, we should be new gen people. That is, there is no doubt. But don't forget the roots when we enjoy the fruits. So
thank you. I think we are coming to the top of the hour, 8 o'clock now. I would like to thank you, Father, for your wonderful presentation and enlightening us all with the history of Christianity in Kerala. I would like to thank all our viewers for their incisive questions, and of course all the the organizers of Pilgrim Stays for making this event happen. And
I had
yes,
two,
Father, you wanted to say something.
just want to show that those books, two recent books, And those who are
Of course.
interested can read afterwards. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Pilgrim Stays, for promoting and sponsoring this event. Thank you very much, everybody, for patiently listening to this session. And I want to thank everyone else at Pilgrim Stays, and good night to you.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.